If my partner has ADHD and rejection-sensitive dysphoria, why do they still fight with me so much? I get some version of this question almost every week. With rejection-sensitive dysphoria, you think the person would be completely compliant and engage in people-pleasing behaviors. But people with rejection-sensitive dysphoria also have attachment issues. One of the things that people with anxious or disorganized attachment do is they'll actually pick at their partners because being able to get an emotional reaction out of you shows them that you care enough to engage with them even as they're being unpleasant. And perversely, you fighting with them gives them some measure of reassurance that you won't leave. When you add ADHD is predominantly a dopamine deficit disorder. And while we usually think of dopamine seeking in terms of positive, pleasurable experiences, dopamine is also released during negative experiences because dopamine is about the motivation to attend to something and pay attention. So when something bad or aversive is happening, we need to orient to pay attention to it because paying attention to it helps with survival. When you're being stalked by a predator, the rush of adrenaline and stress leads to the release of dopamine and norepinephrine so that you can orient to the threat and run away from it. People describe getting a rush when they're arguing with people. And that's because when someone's coming at us or criticizing us, that same threat detection that happens when we experience a physical threat. And so in fending off the emotional attack, our brain floods with dopamine and norepinephrine so that we can pay attention and verbally defend ourselves. And so what I see couples get stuck in, where one or both people have ADHD and rejection-sensitive dysphoria, is they'll get into these patterns where they're fighting with each other, they're picking each other apart, they're criticizing each other, they're making themselves like each other less. But what they don't realize is they're both soothing their rejection-sensitive dysphoria because they're paying attention to each other, even though it's negative, and they're getting dopamine. They're getting that dopamine they're lacking from the negative interaction because the threat of rejection is forcing them to pay attention. This is really critical to realize because once you realize you're actually getting dopamine from a negative interaction, you can interrupt it differently. What's been your experience seeking dopamine from negative sources? I'd love to hear from you.